Hi, Andrew here. And earlier today, I was reminiscing. I got to thinking about a time 18 years ago when Wifey and I were teaching English in China. We were relatively newly married. We'd only been married a couple of years. And my company had opened up an office in the greater Denver area, and I had transferred. And so we were living and playing in Colorado, and oh man, are there some great stories from that. I'll have to remember to tell some of them sometime. But unfortunately, the office closed, and they asked me if I wanted to go to Boston. My wife had a terrible time readjusting to life in Colorado, being that far from friends and family. And we made friends, and we started to really get the hang of it. And it didn't seem like uprooting and doing it out again, all over again in a whole new strange city was optimal. Well, at the time, we were studying Chinese at the University of Denver, and the teacher mentioned teaching English in China. Neither one of us reacted or said anything. And this is really funny because we both did so because we thought the other didn't want to do it. Going back even more years, when I graduated, when Bob Rae had gutted the Ontario economy to the point where 40% of my graduating class had any job, much less an engineering job, I was actually filling out the paperwork to go teach English in Japan. Something I always wanted to do, and I told her that. And she, being interested, also said, well, I kind of thought maybe I'd like to do that. So we chatted it out, and we decided to do it. And long story short, subject of a whole different story, we decided to go and teach English in China. And now this was for 2004, 2005. So 18 years ago. And I was thinking about this because I was on the thought of something else, about how you have a story. You have a story to tell. I have many stories to tell, and I tell them. You may not, but you know what? You have a story, and it's an interesting story. I never thought my life was particularly interesting. I'm a fairly reclusive guy. I'm not really adventurous, and I just followed along, and I followed the path that I had laid out, that was probably laid out for me when sperm met egg, and I turned out to be a reasonably bright guy with a talent for math and fairly serious ADHD. That just screams engineer. And fast forward a few years, and there we are. Not a real adventurous guy. But when we were teaching English in China, I would take the break between classes. Very similar to us here. They would have a 50-minute class and a 10-minute break, and the next class would start on the hour. And on the days when I had either a double with the same class or 2 classes consecutive, I'd go refill my tea water in the teacher's lounge and just sit and quietly think for a few minutes, just to decompress. Well, the other teachers, the Chinese teachers in the English teaching department, one of them saw me and came in and asked if he could join me, and we were chatting for a bit. And over the course of days, weeks, months, the English teachers, the Chinese teachers, all learned that Andrew was going to be sitting in the teacher's lounge, and just stick your head around the corner, and he was always happy to chat. And we would talk, and they wanted to know what life was like outside China. Now, these are teachers in a cow town. It was a cow college that had just been accredited as a university in a tiny little cow town in rural Anhui province? No, Fujian province. In rural Fujian province. No, nowhere. And we were 3 hours bus ride from the nearest international airport. Like, we were in the middle of nowhere. And so they had all grown up in this little town. Putian is the name of it. They'd all grown up in Putian, and they were teaching at the local college, university in Putian. And they had not seen much of anything, really, because of the nature of China when they were growing up. You know, in the 60s and 70s, there was not a lot going on that they could do. Their experience was very limited, or was limited to that. And the stories of my childhood, of my growing up, of my travels, the things that I did, of my moving to another country to work, to being an engineer, and I mean, these things, how I met my wife when I was teaching karate, the stories were just very different from their own. And because the stories were very different from their own, they were stories they wanted to hear. You have a story, and there is an audience for it. Somebody wants to hear your story. You don't have to have a great, adventurous, crazy life to be interesting. Most of the being interesting in a story is in the telling, not in the content. So, think on that. Here I am telling stories to a rather small, but to an audience. You have a story, and somebody wants to hear it. So, tell your story. And thanks for listening to my story. That was my time. Now is your time. And in the meantime, take care of yourself, and you'll see me soon.